right, we covered a ton of stuff last week. So, in terms of takeaways, if each of you were to summarize it in 30 seconds or one thing to remember, what would it be?
I think one of the main takeaways that I got from last week that we mentioned is that the importance of financial stability isn't just about us. It allows us to give to others and to support others, people who are important in our lives, religious organizations, charities that we feel passionate about.
Obviously, the main things is money has to be coming in more than what's going out. We try to avoid, if you do that, you avoid living week to week and subsidizing your income through credit cards, which Gary had a good example today. We've learned that having a education is important, but not necessarily an Ivy League or something overly expensive. People have been able to give examples that with almost any education, one, as long as you get an education, and two, as long as the last one is the name. So if you get your master's, no one really cares where your bachelor's. And that's basically it.
And one of the things I brought up last week is that you want to start early. If you start saving money for the first 10 years, if you invest money for the first 10 years after college and never do it again, and somebody starts on an 11th year, you're going to have more money than them. So the earlier you start, the better.
I think the biggest point I think we wanted to convey, or that I wanted to convey, is that when you're young, when you first start working, you may have a salary for the first time. It seems like you're making more money, right? But you really need to push it hard. If you want to make a difference, you need to push it hard when you're young. You know, whether it's changing jobs or asking for raises or getting promoted or whatever. But you need to push the income as much as you can the younger you are, because as you get older, you're not going to want to work extra weekends. You're not going to want to, you're going to have a family. You're going to have other stuff going on, and you're not going to want to go out there and work 2 jobs or 3 jobs. So when you're young, do it. All right, get it out of the way.
A few things. First, you got to have a basic understanding of math. 6th grade math is more than enough. You got to be reasonably well organized, at least enough to be able to track and understand your expenses and your income. And it also may seem obvious, but you got to have a source of income, and you got to work for your money, and you need to be willing to pay yourself first. And look, it may take 5 or 10 years before you see the impacts of that, before it really starts to become the least bit fun and you see the fruits of your labor. And I think the final thing to remember is, despite all your good intentions and efforts, keep gratitude in mind, because we're all a heartbeat or a half second away from total disaster, getting run over by a truck or some surprise thing out of left field. So keep gratitude in mind too.
Okay.
Well done.
So we're going to move on today to talk about what happens next, right? So we're saying make sure you make money, right? Well, what do you do with it, right? How do you put it to work? How do you make it valuable to you? Everybody's got a different take on that, depending on how you were brought up, your parents, what classes you were in school. So I think we're going to spend some time figuring that out, or at least giving our opinions on that. So does anyone want to go first?
I think one of the key things, that everyone can kind of keep in mind, irrespective of their income level or their background, is trying to keep in mind tax advantage investments, things that are going to put you in advantage, where it's either some kind of contribution that's tax-free, or it grows tax-free, or maybe when you withdraw it, that you don't have to pay taxes on it. Some kind of advantage is going to be to your benefit, either now, in the long run, or sometimes both.
I think we talked a little bit about it last week about 401k, did we not? If not, let's talk about it now. So, the real easy way to save money and make money is using your 401k at work, because most companies will match up to a certain percentage.
But Gary, what the heck is a 401k?
It's farther than a 5k, and
That's a good point.
I need to train for it.
We might need to explain what it is real quick.
The numbers are from the tax code.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I actually just saw something the other day saying a 401k was some accountant from 1980 who changed or read the rules of what it was. It wasn't designed for what it's used for now. I don't remember the details, but they said it was like the biggest thing that's gone crazy because it's not what it was for. But 401k, I don't know actually the definition is, other than it's a tax deferred. So when you have money taken out of your paycheck, you don't pay tax on that. So you're not going to pay taxes on it now. You will pay tax when you start taking out, but at that point, you're going to be making less money because you're probably retired. So your tax percentage will be less. And then, as I said, most companies will match up to a certain percentage. So it's free money when your company matches. Why wouldn't you max it out to take full advantage of that?
So what's that mean? If I'm getting paid $100, I can take the $100 in my pocket, but I'll pay taxes on it. So it's really only about 70, 75 bucks. But if I direct it to my 401k, all $100
You pay
go
zero
into
taxes
it.
on that. Yes, and then most companies will match up to 10% of your salary. So if let's just for example say you're putting $100 in and that was 10%, they would match $100. So you would start off already doubling your money, and you're not paying tax on it until you take it out.
So I would say, in general, what you're talking about is any tax advantaged or tax deferred retirement plan, right? It could be an IRA, because not all companies offer these, right? So it could be an IRA, it could be a self-directed IRA, it could be a 401k. They all kind of behave the same way.
403b, 457, and
Right,
so on.
right. They're all like that. So
A lot
basically,
of numbers and letters.
right. So following the theme, it's if you can defer paying taxes, it's usually a good thing, right? There are cons to doing it, right? Like you can't touch it until you're retired unless you pay a penalty to get it out, right?
But you can borrow from it for yourself.
For certain reasons, you can borrow it, like to buy a house or for some medical problems. But if you wanted to use that money for other things, you are tying it up, right? I can't go start a business with that money, right?
The highest tax rate in this country used to be like 90, 95%. How do I know that all this tax deferred money isn't going to burn me in the end because I've got to pay greater tax rates on it when I pull it out?
That's a great point, Adam. And I think that's where part of our discussion last week based on planning comes into play, right? About planning, what your income is going to be when you retire and looking at that. Because it's not likely over time that the tax brackets, if anything, are going to decrease. But what we have to consider is how much are we going to be earning when we're retired? So trying to plan that out based on our savings is going to be key. And that's going to be an important
I think
point.
the other thing to think about is most people don't save money. This is a way to save money without having to think about it. It's automatically taken out of your paycheck.
Yeah, and it provided your company allows you. So either you get it through your company or you've got to go do it yourself if your company doesn't do it.
You can do a 401k by yourself.
You can do a Roth.
You can do the other ones that we talked about, the IRA, self-directed IRAs, or traditional IRAs on your own.
Right. But then there are some that are only employer-sponsored plans.
Correct. So, so the thing about that, right? How do you know what tax bracket you're going to be in? You don't, right? I know what I'm in today. I don't know what I'm going to be in when I'm retired, right? So what we've done is said, hey, we're going to balance that out, right? So in many 401k plans and in IRAs, you can choose: do I want to pay the taxes now? Or do I want to pay the taxes later, right? So for anything that's considered a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, you pay the taxes now, and then invest. And when you take it out, you don't have to pay the tax. So what we did early on was start splitting the money, putting half in one and half in the other, so that when you get to retirement,
Like diversification, right?
it sounds like diversification. So what we chose to do is say, hey, while we're in a relatively lower tax bracket, say in your 20s or 30s, put half and half, or some into the tax deferred, some into the tax now. They're both retirement
But there's a
accounts.
limit you can put in some of these things.
Yeah, you can limit. There are limits, and you obviously would try to max them out if you can. That's the advantage. But I'm just saying, from a diversity perspective, it gives you a choice later, right? Do I want to take it out of this one and pay the taxes? Do I want to take it out of that one, not pay the taxes? Depends on where you are in your life. When you're retired, right? One year you decide you're going to build a house. I need a bunch of money to do that. I'm going to take it from the one I already paid the taxes on, right? Another year, I'm not doing anything. I'm just eating dog food out of a can. I'll take it out of the one where I got to pay the taxes, right? So, that is where the diversity comes in, and the choices come in that you make early, because you can't unwind that choice later, right? So
The limit does come into play too, though, and you can't double the limit by doing the Roth and the traditional.
Correct.
It is
all one.
combined, but the idea is that you're maximizing all of them, and that's right. Goes right to the point of paying yourself first. That's one way to do it.
right.
Yeah, and that word that you mentioned about diversification is just huge. One of the quotes that I once read that totally stood out to me, and it always applies to so many aspects of life, is a cord of three strands is not easily broken, right? And that totally applies to financial stability with diversification, right? If you have different pillars, upholding your financial stability, you're well better off, right? In case one fails, one isn't doing so good, you have others to rely on.
So diversification was actually topic number 2. So let's back up a second.
So Ray, because it's fresh in your mind, say the 55 rule.
The 55 rule is just a small like tweak to the on the 401k. So when you pull money out of a 401k or an IRA, you have to wait until you're 59 and a half if you don't want to pay penalties. The 55 rule lets you pull money out of a 401k. I don't know if it applies to IRAs, probably not. If you quit your job or leave your job when you're 55 or older, you can start taking money out right away. You don't have to wait till 59 and a half. So there's a gap in there that you can fill before you get to that age. But it has to be the last job you left. You can't take it from a 401k from a previous job. It has to be only the one you left.
Right.
So there are even more ways to play, with the systems that were given.
Right. And sometimes within those systems, you may have more or less play, whether it be a 403B, some of the ones Adam mentioned. Sometimes they'll vary also.
That's right. I think the state lets you do the same thing as the 55, but at 50. Maybe it's federal, one of them. So you have to know what you have, right? You got to know what you have, know what you're doing, read the rules, read the fine print, right? Or ask us questions and we'll answer them.
So diversification is not necessarily, hey, I've got some money in a Roth IRA, a traditional IRA, a 403B, 401k, and so forth. That is really just paying yourself more and more and more, which is great. What's the traditional definition of diversity?
To me, it's different asset classes, right? There's real estate, there's investing in the stock market, there's bonds, there's gold and silver, right? You could buy paintings, right? You could start a business, right? You have all those different things. And within those, there's lots of other.
Anything that
So what's
appreciates.
diversity like in a 401k? What does that look like? How do I know I'm diversified?
You don't want to be
within
all
that?
in tech or all overseas, or so you want to have a little bit of money in different areas. And you're probably will look at it and say, well, this area sucked for the last 2 years, but that doesn't mean you pull out because everything's going to be cyclical. Something else is going to be up and come down, and something's going to be down and come up. So if you're not diversified and you have it all in one, when everything goes down, you're going to be in a lot more trouble than when you're not.
So stocks, bonds, cash, metals, small companies, large companies, or small cap, big cap, small cap, large cap. Sorry, Rutgers just won by 1 point, so half of my brain is over there.
Awesome.
In Wisconsin. But there's also diversity beyond that. And Ray, you just mentioned real estate and paintings. There's probably a way to work them into an IRA. Very complicated, but I think you're talking about once those qualified accounts are fully funded, there's still more diversification you could do.
Correct. I mean, look, we always, when we were younger, we put everything we could into these tax qualified or tax deferred accounts, right? That was the mantra, do as much as you can, right? There was a time where, we were looking through the money, and I don't know if we were looking at buying real estate or something, but we didn't have money. Like there was not enough around to do anything with. And I sat back and thought, like, what are we doing, right? We don't spend extra money, we save. It turns out it was all in those accounts, right? It's all in the 401ks. We put it in IRAs. It's all buried and it's great, but you don't have anything to use today to buy a house or to start a business or to do something else. So you do have to be a little careful. And I'm not saying don't max out the 401ks. I think you should do that in the beginning, but at some point, right, there was this trade-off to say, like, I don't have anything accessible right now, right? So another part of the diversification talk is, where do you keep all this money?
Time
We
frame.
probably got to define qualified versus unqualified funds. Qualified is something that has some restrictions on it. Typically, you're not tapping that until retirement. Unqualified is a regular
else.
brokerage account, everything else that you can access free of any kind of retirement restrictions or age requirements.
Yep. So we are straying, right? So we should go back to how do you make your money make more money, right? So this is one. We're still only on Ed's topic, right? Put it into a retirement account. So what else?
Well, I think Gary hit upon a point where he mentioned, that things are cyclical. And I think that's a huge point because I think when, people are young and even throughout our lifespan, we're going to see those cycles. And if we haven't experienced one yet, human emotion is going to come into play where we're automatically going to think, let's pull this out. And understanding that if you have really good years, then you're going to have some years that are not as strong. And I think that's okay. Understanding that it's about the long term and not being too focused on the short term, not getting too overly excited, not get too overly down on yourself when you're having a bad year, but thinking more in terms of the long term.
When you're looking at investing, it's hard not to be emotional and make decisions off of emotion. And I know everybody in this room doesn't agree with this, but I believe in having a good financial advisor. So I don't have to think about it. And I don't have to say, well, I don't want to sell this for X reason. And he says, no, you need to because of this. And then you listen. So I believe getting a good financial advisor in the beginning will help you. But you don't want to run into a problem with someone's like, you don't have a whole lot of money, so I don't really care about you, which is an experience I had 25 years ago. And if the guy actually spent some time with me, he would have all my money now instead of me leaving.
So, quick poll: to what extent have each of us relied on a financial advisor along the way?
I never have. I've read books and talked to people who worked in the financial market, but I think there's nothing wrong with hiring a financial advisor. And I think it's great benefits. And I think very much like our last few episodes in the podcast, how we share different experiences of getting, to a stable point. That's just another aspect, right, of how people can, go about that.
I've never used one.
I have never used one.
I have never used one either, but I think all of you guys have found that over the years, you get approached and by folks who want to do that. And yeah, they're looking to make a buck. They're looking to make, they think they can help you, but there's a fee for it. And I'll tell them straight up, I'm not interested. I'm DIY, but you want to take a look at what I've got, give me advice, take me to lunch. I'm all for it, but I'm telling you, it's going to be charity work on your point. Usually they accept. I get free advice. Most of the time it's what I already know, but every once in a while, there's a couple of good tips in there that I'll follow. And I'll thank them. If it's good enough, I'll end up paying for the lunch.
So I'm going to backtrack on my statement. So I did stumble into a financial advisor. I was working in an office of a financial business, and I was talking to one of the guys who had the corner office, and I said, "Hey, what do you do?" And he was a head financial guy. He had a team of people, and I said, "So if I gave you my money to manage, what would you do with it?" So he spent like 20 minutes, showing me what he does, and I said, "Okay, right." And I never really wanted to do that, but I said, I'm standing here with this guy, right? So we'll just do it. So it turned out, we did it for a few years, and it was just okay, right? He would call me once in a while, right? To say, hey, we should do this or we should do that, but it really wasn't like a full management thing. And if I called him to make changes or to buy or sell stuff, he would just do it. So I didn't get a great, experience out of that. One other thing that Adam reminded me of, I was going up the elevator one day in my building at work, and some other guy walked in the building, but it was late. It was like I was going into the building at 7 p.m., and so was this guy. So I made some comment about like, why are you're going the wrong way in the elevator. Why are you going up? We should be going down. And he said, well, I'm meeting some clients, whatever. He was a financial advisor. So then he gave me the spiel, like, hey, what are you doing? Do you want to talk? We can do, you can. So I said, fine. So I met with him. We talked a little bit, and then he said, okay, next step, give me all your paperwork, all of your assets, all your stuff. We'll do this and this and this, right? And I said, look, there's a good chance I'm not going to do this, right? Because I kind of do it myself, right? I've kind of been there before. So I don't want you guys spending a lot of time on this if we're not going to do it. He's like, no, that's okay. Gave him all the stuff, took weeks, went into a room with them. He brought his assistants. They did charts, tables, paperwork, pages and pages of stuff, right? Give me all this stuff. And there was nothing special in it that I didn't already think that I knew. So I said, no, thanks. Just got up and walked out of the room. Didn't even say anything. He just walked away and never saw him again.
He walked away or you walked away?
He walked away.
Wow.
Like angry, you think?
Yeah.
So
you told them.
And I told him there's a 95% chance this is not going to happen.
I think it's important to understand that the average person is not going to be as disciplined to stare at their money and look into where they should put it as some people in this room is. I would never do it. It's a job. Yes. And it get too emotional around it. I just raised all this money, just went up this much. If I sell this right now, I have to pay all these taxes. And it's one of the things my financial advisor says is you can't let the tail wag the dog. And I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, we've had this discussion, but when the stock market was doing great back when we were around 2000, I had some stocks when I was doing it on my own. So I did a period of time I was doing my own. And I had stocks where I was up $100,000. And when you're 30 years old, it's a lot of money. I'm like, shit, I'm retiring when I'm 30. I'm retiring soon. And then it kept going. It's like, oh, this is supposed to go up to 70. It's only at 30 now, but it went down $2. It's all right. It's going to keep going. Until it got back down to where I bought it at and I made no money. I'm like, this is not good because it was stupid. And I made a lot of mistakes like that. I'm like, I'm not doing this again. So I found somebody who I knew And I know some people in this room feel like, why should I pay my 1% for them to do it? But it takes it away from me. I don't have to think about it. And I believe they make at least as much as I'm paying them.
That was one of my two questions, Gary. So you mentioned it before that you had one of those. What is the rate for the advisor?
It's going to be depend. I mean,
compared
I
to
think
the S&P?
I think that I don't know if you can compare that. It's there. If you have let's back up a second. In any field, there's going to be bad people and there's going to be good people. So you can we can have a lot of people who have bad experiences with financial advisors, and there may be a lot of bad financial advisors. There's also a lot of bad of
It's not the
everything.
experience, the percentage.
Well,
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if you have a bad one, they're going to probably equal the same amount of. They're going to probably make you as much money as the index, right? And then you're paying probably more people who are having. If you're starting lower, you're going to be paying more percentage. You might be paying 2%.
Let's just say the average. So Johnny's question is really, is the financial advisor going to make you more than the average? Like if you were doing
A good
it
one,
yourself,
yes.
right?
But I'm saying yours. If
Mine,
you took
yes.
your rate of return
Yeah, yeah.
in 10 years.
Every
whatever,
time we compare how much I went up the prior year compared to everything else, it's always better.
Well, that's good to know.
That's great.
Right? That's number one. And two, Ray, have you done in any of your spreadsheets or in your head, you started your 401k at 20 years old and you look at the total at 30
Nope.
and you bought a house at 20 years old
He
and
does
you
that.
sold it at 30? Which one made better?
I got the
think
question.
That's too time specific.
I don't do
it
that.
depends on
He
what
does
year you start. Either one could be better than the other.
Yeah,
No,
that's
but
fair. Yeah.
you get the exercise though. I think it's good to maybe plug those numbers in and maybe next week show people examples if it had the same return, right? Because one's compounding different than the other, right?
But it all
waiting-
depends. You could buy like if you bought a house in 2005, you're going to make a lot less money than if you bought it in, let's say, 2015 or whenever.
We got to talk to
It's
the
a tough
research
comparison.
committee.
Look, because stocks are going to throw off a dividend, or large enough funds will most likely throw off a dividend, whereas your house is a liability. It's going to eat away at what you purchased it for in the form of taxes, maintenance, and upkeep. So
To my
that's
point,
a real
right?
hard comparison.
Because we could also add to that comparison 401k, the asset of a single family appreciating, and a 2, 3, 4 family, right?
if you wanted to
There's
get
a
it-
good thing to
yeah.
do with that because I think we could talk about it and say it as an example, but we could say, all right, over a process of 35 years, 40 years, we take this average. Because remember, putting in a 401k, no one calls you that the sink is overflowing. No, none of that, right? So I think it's one of those things that we could put on a piece of paper and say, these are the real numbers if you went from 1950 to 2000.
Yeah, and we can. That would be an analytical discussion, and we can say like we can get all the averages over those long periods of time and just compare them all,
look, I
right?
believe the S&P generally accepted 10 to 11% over the long haul. Real estate generally beats it by 2 or 3% over the long haul, but you've got added expenses associated with real estate. So therefore,
think it's
it's
more
about
like
a
5.
wash, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a wash makes sense because if it was heavily weighted one way or the other, everybody would go there.
But it goes,
Change the economics until it
But it's
balances
not as easy to
again.
get
it goes to a
into property,
financial
though.
advisor, right? The one's much simpler. The 401k it's a no-brainer.
Right.
Zero work.
But I think you would categorize them like 401ks, stock investments, all that stuff would just be lumped into one pile because they all follow the same market, right?
Not necessarily,
Except for the
depending on
taxes.
depending on the investments you make within that.
Well, right, but you have that choice to make. So
Right.
you can make the same choice in all of those places, right? And then compare them, right? If you're gonna get very specific or diversify or whatever, then you can try to play the market, play the game, right? So you would compare the bigger buckets, right? Investing in the stock market, investing in real estate, and maybe there's one or two other categories: gold and silver, kind of heavy metal, or precious metals. And figure that out, right? So yeah, we can do that one of these days, but that's going to take a little bit of prep.
So one of the good things, and you and Johnny kind of mentioned it, with that diversification, sometimes there are some funds, like one particular company that I really like. Not sure if I'm able to mention
Does it start
the name.
with a V and end with an Andgard?
That could
Yeah.
Yeah,
just happens to be ones that I'm preferential towards. I think they're great.
I don't wanna
Their
mention
their
it.
fees are extremely low, and I think they're awesome. But they happen to have a real estate fund, right? It was called REIT, then the tax laws changed, and now I think it's called Real Estate Something Fund, REIF. And then they also have precious metal funds, and so within there are different funds that are available. And for anyone who's not familiar with it, if it's some kind of single investment in a company, typically that's stock, If it's some kind of diversity within companies, they call that a fund. That's typically mutual funds, but they do the same kind of idea with real estate. And so I think to your point, right, what you're mentioning about, employer sponsored plans, if your plan happens to be with a company such as Vanguard or another comparable company that offers more diversification within it, and that'll vary greatly from employer to employer. Sometimes you'll have a REIT available, or sometimes you'll have a precious metal fund, and that's in addition to various stock funds. So I think that's kind of a good thing, depending where you look. And I think when people are looking at jobs, one of the things they're constantly focused on is, what will my salary be? Because in their mind, they think it's the end all be all, when in reality, it's really not. You got to look at the benefits associated with that job, which really in the long term may carry more weight.
I don't think most young people understand the benefit side.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree. That's why I bring it up.
To go back on the REIT, and I don't know if you said what it is. It's a real estate investment trust, right?
Yes.
So, we're talking about investing and buying properties, and Ray said something to me once, and it was funny but very appropriate. I bought my first house. I'm like, well, this would be a good test to see if I like being a landlord. He goes, nobody likes being a landlord, and I realized, yes, he's right. I said, never do I get a phone call or a text from my tenants to say, hey, how's it going? Right. So when I got a text the other day, I'm like, shit, what the hell is this going to be now? It's like another problem I have to deal with. Even if it's minor, it's never, hey, how's it going? So I was like, I didn't want to buy more houses and deal with more problems because I don't know how to fix things. So I went into REITs. And the benefit of REITs, if you get a good one, is you don't have anybody calling you. The downside is you don't have the property growing, appreciating. So, but we're talking about like the stock market has sucked the last couple of years or last year or whatever it's been. And my REITs are the only thing that's been positive where everything else has been negative. So it's not growing the same amount as a house, but people are paying the rents every month and every quarter you get money coming back in.
Can you explain what that is?
Well, you can get a real estate investment just on one property, like an apartment complex, and you get in and that's another thing. I didn't want to do that. So you can get an apartment complex. You get a bunch of people say, we need $5 million. You chip in your whatever percent and you have X percent or stock or whatever you want to call it of that apartment.
A specific apartment,
one
building, so not very diversified.
Yes. The problem here is that you are now in this until they sell it. You're going to get a dividend or whatever every quarter based off the rents coming in, which is usually pretty good. I have friends who do it and I was looking into it. But you can't get out or very easily until they sell it. And then once it's sold, it's not that easy to say, well, I don't want to roll into the next one. So you can't, I didn't want to be that much into that. So I went through and got a read through my advisor, which has hundreds of buildings or thousands of buildings with things like Amazon warehouses, which are pretty much
This is a publicly traded mutual fund or ETF.
All I know is it's a REIT.
I'm going to guess it's one or the other, yeah.
So it was simpler. I didn't have to worry about when I can get my money in or out. I didn't have to worry about somebody calling me about something being broken. So that made me more comfortable doing it instead of buying more properties.
Yeah.
Does that one give you a monthly dividend? Usually REITs, that's one of the benefits.
I'm not sure if it's monthly. I don't look at it, but I did just get
yearly.
my tax statement and I saw how much dividends I got for the year, and I was pretty happy with it, we'll say.
Yeah, and look, the real estate business is a vast amount of different diversity in of itself, right? You can be a landlord of apartment units. You can buy single family houses and rent them out. You can multifamily houses. You can buy vacation homes and rent them out, right? And there's probably a bunch of other flavors that, like all the things Gary described. So people have to decide like what makes sense for them, right? I mean, there are plenty of things. There are websites where you can go on and buy houses in Ohio, and it tells you how much they're going to rent for, how much they're going to cost today, the rate of return, all this kind of stuff. But you're not there, right? You're going to just do this remotely. Johnny, you did one remote, right? But you have somebody managing it for you, right?
Correct.
So there's so many ways to do it. So I would say real estate is a whole subject all by itself, right? It's just one of these things, right? So one of these things of how to make your money, make more money. So what else is there? So we talked about stock market, talked about real estate. How else can your money make more money?
So one of the things
Invest in yourself and buy something like your own business. Start your own business.
You can start your own business, or invest in yourself could also be go back to school, get a different education, advance your career, right? Like, so invest in yourself can actually be at least those two things, right? Get more education to get a better job or start your own business, right? So I don't know if I'm going to spend 2 minutes on that.
Well, I think while you're doing that, you don't necessarily need to trash the day job either. And I think that
Correct.
that's kind of my idea of hyper diversification, right? You've got your paycheck coming in, and what you do with that between stocks, bonds, cash, precious metals, private collections, whatever, that's diversification, right? But that's all dependent on what? On one stream of income, one paycheck. That's not diversified. You can get fired tomorrow. You can open your email box and find you got fired an hour ago. Diversification is also about multiple streams of income.
Yeah, that's a huge point. And on that, point about the diversification, one of the things we talked about, with employer-sponsored plans, about sometimes the selection may differ in terms of who your employer allows you to invest your retirement money with. I was very, very shocked to find out when I was talking with some of my coworkers in healthcare, and I don't know if this happens in other industries, but some other colleagues I knew who worked for other companies, their retirement plan, the large majority of it was with their company. And I was shocked. I was like, wait a minute, you don't get to pick where your retirement dollars go? And like, oh, no, we have to have the large majority with
Well,
We're
our
all going
company.
down with the ship.
And
Right.
I was very, very
How about
surprised
that
with
for
that. So
anti-diversification?
again, like Gary has said, that he mentioned that he doesn't think a lot of younger folks are thinking about their benefits. And really, when you're looking at a job, you need to consider the benefits, not just the salary. The other thing with healthcare is if you work for a large healthcare network, if you look at the money that the employees are paying per paycheck toward their healthcare premiums, it is so much smaller than what everyone outside of healthcare is paying. And that is huge. And people don't realize that. So there's a lot to consider with
It's also
benefits.
different from company to company.
Yes,
Again, I don't
yes,
think people
very
realize.
much, very much, yeah.
So I know when I do interviews for my company, when I'm interviewing people who are, say, 30-ish or younger, and they're maybe not happy with the salary we're offering, I'm like, our benefits outweigh it. Like maybe you'll make $5,000-$10,000 more somewhere else, but our benefits are better, and they don't get it. But then I talk to people who are around late 40s or 50s, and like, your benefits are great. I'm like, yes, most people don't get that. So you can't look at you have to look at the whole package.
But there's also like what Adam is saying about diverse streams of income, right? So you can almost think about that as like a separate thing, like the salary and then the benefits. That's a benefit, right?
Still one job, though.
It's still one job, right? So how else can you affect that, right? So you can do side work, you can start your own business on the side, you can work part-time, you can do per diem work like Ed has been doing, right?
Can you paint? Can you tutor? Can you
Coach.
coach?
Right. So you
Paid
can
gigs are a little tough.
And
Can
nowadays-
can you landlord? Can you be a landlord's right hand man? You know how to turn a wrench.
Can you be a handyman?
and today you can just go on
handy
online,
woman.
right? There's a Fiverr website. There's a couple of other websites where people just go on there and say, I need someone to write my resume. I need someone to draw this. I want to write a book, but I can't draw. I need someone to do the illustrations for me. There's a million things that you just go on there and say, I'll do this for this much money. I'll do this for this much money. It's all these little jobs. The commitment's not there. I don't have to go and commit to working every Saturday at this part-time job. I can just go on this thing, pick jobs that I like, do them in my spare time, get them finished, get paid, go do another one, right? So like there's a lot of accessibility
Do
now.
Uber, do Lyft.
Yeah,
on
you
your
can-
way
you
into
can-
work and home from work, go a little bit out of your way and get paid for it.
So I've had an Uber driver, and I talk to every one of them, right? How long do you do this? How long, whatever. And one guy does that. He's like, yeah, I turn it on in the morning. I get a ride that takes me to work. I get paid for that. I go to work all day, and I turn it on, and I get a ride that takes me home from work. So I get paid for commuting, basically, right? Even if it just washes out the cost of your gas and stuff, it's still a
Well,
bonus.
it can't be that
right?
simple because when you don't have a choice of where the person you pick up is where
I
they're
think
going.
you can tell it. I think there are some constraints you can put on it. Like I want to end my shift in this location, and they'll kind of like guide you in that direction.
I don't think most people realize.
and if he's hungry, he does like the Uber Eats on the way too.
yeah,
Right.
and he does.
Hey, buddy, you want
deliver.
fries with that?
Right,
So,
right.
you know,
I don't think
passenger like it.
Yeah.
It's a little perk.
I don't think people realize, and this isn't across money or work or anything, but it comes across anything. Is people see somebody else being successful and they think they're just successful, and then you get to know the person and realize they do a lot of things to be successful, whatever it is. As I said, work, athletics, anything. It doesn't just happen, but people assume they're just lucky, they're talented, they stepped in it, whatever, and then you realize like person driving Uber on the way there to work and the way back, maybe it brings another $300 a week, but it's $300 more than somebody did nothing.
Yeah. And even if it was $300 a month, it's still more.
Right.
And there's plenty of people there's plenty of emperors out there with no clothes too. There's plenty of people who look like they're very wealthy, but I remind people, it just looks like they spend a lot of money. That's
Or they
very
do.
different.
Well, you
And
could have a very
they
expensive
may
car. Doesn't
be-
mean you have a lot of money for it.
Right. Maybe incredibly in debt with, night sweats and heart palpitations every night. You don't know. And it doesn't really matter.
I had a neighbor, Ted. You remember Ted, who had made a comment once that he can usually tell, like in the neighborhood, who has a lot of money and who doesn't. Like he doesn't look at the cars, he doesn't look at the house. He just looks at who mows their own lawn, right? And he just said, like, that guy's mowing his own lawn. Doesn't matter what car he's got in the driveway. He's probably not doing that great. Right?
Really?
That's what he thought.
I disagree.
Right.
Well, maybe it worked in this neighborhood, but maybe this was after he drained a couple bottles of Aquavit.
That's right.
That was Ted's thing.
that was his drink. But
I don't
it
even know
just
what Aquavit
it just
is, but that's how you have to say it too.
yeah. It's but
I
it's
cut
just,
my own lawn, so that doesn't fly.
But you cut your own lawn for a reason, right? So if you cut your own lawn and you don't have a Mercedes in the driveway, right? So what he was saying was that house is, got two Mercedes in the driveway, but
Got
the guy's
it.
cutting his own lawn.
Got it.
So which one tells a better story? Because you could have borrowed the money in bad debt, like we talked about last week, to buy those cars, but he's still going to mow his own lawn because he can't afford both, right? So to pay someone else to cut his lawn. So
One of the things Gary said, I think, is really important, and that is people don't realize the steps, what it takes sometimes to get to a point where someone might be considered successful in some way. And I think one of the things that younger people lose sight of, and I tell this to my students all the time, is one of the key steps to success is failure, whether it be financial, academic, to what degree is variable. But if you don't expect to make mistakes along the way, you're never going to get anywhere, right? It's going to happen. And if you let those things set you back, right, mentally, emotionally, financially, then you're never going to get anywhere.
So perfect. Everybody tell one of your big mistakes.
Make big mistakes.
Yeah, in this financial.
Well, I think we all got our asses kicked in 99, 2000 with the dot-com bust, right?
Except Ed.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
Because you didn't
Okay,
partake.
Yeah, I didn't partake in that.
Right.
It was,
Right.
it was
This
it just seemed phony.
Before you were investing, or you were just invested in other things?
No, I thought it was phony. And at that time, Ray was talking about the point where he was looking, hey, we don't have a lot of money. We're totally maxing out in our 401ks. Well, I was under the belief that, yes, I am. And I'm going to do that because I don't want extra money around because I don't need extra money around. And so we kind of
Who
had
wants extra
different
money?
philosophies about that.
So,
Well, it all depends on your philosophy and what you want to do in life.
so Ed, you didn't have it in other vehicles. Well, I guess it wasn't vehicles and
Yeah.
things. It wasn't trying to grow somewhere.
It wasn't individual stocks where I was saying this particular .com is going to do awesome. Let me buy that individual stock. No, I wasn't doing
he
that.
was in
so I was in different
mutual
funds.
funds.
Yeah, I was in different funds. So did it take a hit? Yeah. With the diversity, is there less of a hit? Yes. With individual stocks, was there more of a hit? Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not like I was totally clean, but I did not partake in the individual investments in .com businesses.
Johnny.
I guess biggest would be the first real estate downfall after I had the 3-family. They were like in half, and I just assumed they would keep going down, and didn't buy, didn't pay attention, and then the rise was way too fast, and you couldn't catch it up, and all the local investors had snatched up everything because obviously, but it's very similar to the stock, right? When to sell and when to buy. Very difficult to time. And I wasn't paying attention. And I'll give you an example. The house across the street was very similar to the one I had at the time, a little shorter, but I'm almost sure it was still a 3-family, just squattier. And it was 178. I'm pretty sure in this rise.
How many squatters were in it?
What year are we talking about?
Oh, okay.
So right around there, 2009, 2000.
Right after the crash.
Yeah, right after the crash. So if he was looking for a house a while back, that house was probably 5-something.
Before 2009.
No,
Oh,
just
now.
recently.
Now.
And what was it? What could you have picked it up for?
180.
I think we could all say things like that. But you were looking, so you can call that a mistake since you were looking.
Oh, no. It was right across the street from my house, which is worse.
The thing that's great is that I just never made any mistakes. No, I'm kidding. You can always say, I should have done this, I should have done that. I think the only mistakes we can really say is I didn't do this when you had the opportunity. Like in around the 2000, I had multiple stocks that were just crazy. And that's when it's like, yeah, I'm retiring when I'm 30. I mean, I had bought one stock at 75 cents. I had thousands and it went to 30 something dollars. Like, this is awesome. And I had some of it in my Roth. I'm like, just to say, in the last 25 years or 20-ish years, my Roth is not where it was when I screwed up by not selling those stocks. So I had multiple stocks that were just doing crazy. And I was, well, if I sell this, I have to pay all its taxes. Also, it's going to go higher. Why would I sell it now? And just so many mistakes, which is then when I said, I'm not doing this on my own anymore.
So yeah, most of us had the same thing. I remember coming home, and I was still living at home because it was the right thing to do. And telling my dad, like, Dad, I made $15,000. My accountant made $15,000 today. I'm not even going to need to work anymore. Right? I'm gonna keep doing
That's all you
this,
need is 15 grand.
right? And then, yeah, it just went all in the toilet, like Gary said. So that was one of the big things, was not getting out at the right time, right? When you know that something's not quite right, you need to make adjustments. And the other thing, I think, again, why didn't we do something? After the crash, we should have been buying real estate. And we kind of did. I won't say we made that mistake. We probably didn't do it aggressively enough, but that was when we bought our first investment property in the Poconos. So that was a good thing. What we didn't do is buy more. And what we also didn't do is go down the shore and after Hurricane Sandy and just buy all the stuff that was just devastated and people were giving it away. Right. And we just didn't think about it because
Was that really what was happening?
it was there were obliterated towns.
Yeah.
No, I know, but were really people getting rid of
There was
their...
two
Yeah.
people. People selling right away, and the people who waited 7 to 11 months for FEMA.
Yeah.
They just sat there and waited.
Right.
But there were people who didn't even wait for FEMA. They just said, "Give me whatever."
Yeah, and there were a lot of people
And
who,
out they
like,
went.
if you had people had a house in the family, right, for years and for generations, maybe they didn't have any kind of like flood insurance or anything because you don't have to, right?
You
So,
also didn't have to have them so many feet off the ground back then.
well, but you don't have to do anything if you own the house outright. It's the banks that
Got
tell
it.
you got to do that
Good,
stuff
yeah.
because you've got a loan, right? So they didn't have anything. So how do you rebuild your house? You got to pay it in cash, right? Like, so a lot of people were stuck because they didn't have insurance or they didn't have these, stuff like that in place because, they got their house from their parents and stuff. So there was probably a lot of opportunity beachfront or close to the beach in these towns that we just completely walked away from. Didn't even go look, and we probably should have done that.
So it's all very simple. It's just, buy low, sell high, right? But the reality is, with trying to time the market or time stocks, doesn't matter how high something is, can always go higher. Doesn't matter how low it is, can always go lower. And hindsight's always 20/20. So don't.
Why is
beat
it 2020?
yourselves
Because I
up.
feel like it should be
Maybe
20
it's
infinity.
2010.
It should be 20 infinity. Like, you could see forever.
No. Then the denominator would get lower. It'd be 2010 or 25.
20-0.
But you still have the filter of your own, brain fog or lens, whatever's going on. So it's never going to be perfect.
Close.
So you say at least 20/20, at least average. Looking back, looking forward,
we're
you're
not
kind
average
of
now. We're
blind.
better than average.
Is anybody
If we're
here
looking
still
backwards.
2020? I know I'm not.
2020.
Vision.
No, not even.
And
close.
What else could he possibly
I can't
do?
see who said that through his glasses. Yeah, come on. But
wasn't sure what you were talking
I
about.
think the point is don't beat yourself up. You are never going to sell something at its absolute high point or buy at its absolute low point more than once or twice.
I
I think
agree.
it's also
Yeah,
important.
absolute
When you
luck.
look at your stocks, and you say, "Oh, great, I am up 20% this year." It doesn't matter until you sell. It doesn't matter, and I'm down 20%. That sucks, but it doesn't matter until you sell it. So it doesn't. None of this matters until you're actually needing to sell it.
Yeah.
Point taken. And you got to look at it as heartlessly as you can. If it's down 20%, that's a good thing. It's on sale.
Yeah,
Buy more.
buy more.
You got to have that kind of attitude. And with the diversification, Gary, I think you said before, sometimes some of the different asset pools, small cap, large cap, tech, foreign stocks, some are up, some are down. There's also strategies that say, buy the 3 that were down biggest last year for the upcoming year.
Assuming it's still a good business.
Well, if you're doing indexes within those segments, you don't even need to worry about that. I'm not advocating that, but it's the idea everything eventually reverts to the mean, right? Mean reversion. So if something is incredibly down, it's more likely to come up than something that is setting 52-week highs week after week after week.
Right. If it's gonna, yeah. Well, Another topic of rebalancing portfolios, which we'll not get into here, but that is something that should be done, right? Based on whether things are high or low, and all of that stuff matters.
So one of the things that I noticed with you guys, as I'm listening to this, it's interesting because many of you guys kind of refer to, oh, we should have bought this, we should have bought this then. And, we mentioned how everything is cyclical. One of the things, years ago I read, from Warren Buffett, it was an article where people were asking, well, what's the best thing to do when times are tough and economic times are tough? What's the best thing to do? And his advice I thought was amazing. It had nothing to do with investing. It says you need to hone in and perfect the skills that you have in your profession or industry. And I thought that was totally key. So when I got really ticked off, I think it was like early 2000s and the market went down, and I was like, look at that. That stinks. Look at my retirement account. That's terrible, right? I decided, I was talking to my wife and I was like, we have to go back to school. We can, get another degree, and I can go and I can get board certified in a certain specialty. And because I did that, other avenues opened up, for me where I can teach now. So I think looking at other opportunities in the market and real estate to yield long-term gains is one option. But then other people who might be in a profession might choose to go that route that Warren Buffett suggests and perfect your core of skills to seek further certification.
Investing in yourself, I think, is never a bad bet.
Yeah, and we talked about that earlier, right? Like, in order for all this to work, you've got to make more early on, right? So doing that, investing in yourself is what helps get that done, right? And then for you, it paid off at the end because now you get to teach and you actually enjoy it, right?
20%.
But I will say this. I will say, and I'm sure we can find this quote from Warren Buffett also, where he says, when there's blood in the streets, you should be buying.
Of course.
Right? So it goes both ways. Invest in yourself, but take advantage of opportunities when they're there, right? But you have to be ready for that. You have to have money available. You have to have saved, not be living on the credit cards, right? Because you can't do anything, when that happens. Otherwise, it's your blood in the street.
Well, you could be like Adam and take all the money out of credit cards to buy this and then just pay it back before it's due.
You can do that.
What is it, 6 months you were saying you were getting, or a year of interest free?
Yeah, somewhere up to 12 months.
Yeah. So you can do it. You just got to be
Yeah.
diligent in paying it back.
All right. So we're going to run out of time. You want to talk about hyper diversification, or do we already do that?
Well, hyper diversification is really just not limiting yourself to a single stream of income, right? So what do you do to diversify away from your single paycheck? And I think we touched on that's, second full-time job, part-time job, side gigs. Can you, do odd jobs, handyman, do a little Uber, a little Lyft, tutoring, anything.
Look, if you're married, there's two incomes, right? And if you're not both working in the same company, there's some diversification there too, right? So you have that as well.
OnlyFans.
What's that? Oh, gambling on sports. Yeah.
That's not what I said, but
He's like,
That's like when Lois wanted to.
I don't know what that is.
That's like when Lois wanted to call Family Man Mr. Skin, and it didn't really work. Chris told her why.
So
Anyone?
I guess nobody. Oh, Gary, you and Gary.
yeah.
Thanks.
The only ones.
I didn't say it.
So any other diversified income
Yes.
options that we didn't cover yet?
Yes, there's another diversified income option that I never really thought of until I was reading a financial self-help financial book, and it was talking about how when you save and cut costs, you're actually increasing your income tax-free. And I went there and I was like, what? What are you talking about? And then he gave an example.
100%.
He's saying, all right, something's going to cost you $1,000. So if you go out and get a job and you make $1,000, that doesn't cover that cost because that's a second job. And you got to pay tax on that money. You make less than $1,000. So if something costs you $1,000, maybe if you go out and make $1,400, $1,300, then that'll equal the cost. But if you do something somehow, you help a friend, he helps you. Now that $1,000 is essentially tax-free earnings, but it's not earnings. You didn't spend it. So it's tax-free earnings. And I thought that was a real interesting perspective. When I started looking at that, I was like, wow, I was like, that's so true, right? And then he applied it to investing too, right? When you're looking at it, he's like, you got to look at it from if you save and cut down, it's tax-free. And I was like, that's a really cool perspective. The other thing that we didn't touch upon, which I think from my experience has been kind of a double-edged sword, and that is the tax advantage vehicles for saving for children's education. The 529 plans and the Coverdell ESAs, which are education savings accounts. I think those can be a great way to grow those funds tax-free, for education purposes. One thing I didn't know of when I was using those is apparently they're not just for college. And apparently they're not just for the child you're saving for. You know, you have to look at your income limits, but a lot of times they're applicable for kindergarten, elementary school, high school. You can use the 529 plans for that. A
Not
lot
as
of
much,
times.
though.
That's
Typically
correct. There's some limits.
transferable among siblings and
That's
first
correct.
cousins.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of
Wow.
flexibility
I
in
didn't know
there.
cousins.
Yeah, the 529s more so than the ESAs. I did both. And the covered L ESA doesn't have as much. And now, from what I understand, they actually changed the limitation. So if you make over a certain amount, you can't. But it's definitely worth looking into. I found those to be advantageous. But like we we're talking about on a previous episode, how we're talking about no matter how much you save, I'm not so sure it's a good bet just funding the entire education bill for your kids. I think having them, be part of it and have a team approach is always best.
Right, but regardless, whatever you are contributing, doing it tax free is better, right? So it falls into the similar bucket, right? Because you can max out a 401k, you can max out an IRA. Well, here's another bucket you can max out with a very similar tax advantage to it. There's also an HSA, the healthcare savings account. We didn't talk about that at all. Those are really great, probably the best of all of these. But I don't think we're going to get into that. But don't forget about that one.
Write that down.
Write that down. So, any closing statements? Anything you guys want to summarize here?
Well, the best way to diversify, of course, is with the Attic Static blog.
Can't beat that.
Did I say blog? Yeah, podcast. Sorry. Wait. You know, you got five Gen Xers around here. We're bound to have screw ups like that.
Thank you for listening to the Attic Static podcast. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment below. Or come check us out at our website at atticstaticpod.com. And stay tuned for new episodes out every Monday.